Cyril here. It's the end of the year, and I'm still ranting about what coworkers and coworkers' relatives say because we're all a bunch of teachers. We might as well start yelling about things. Now, I primarily teach a 6th through 12th grade, and there have been some issues. I could blame the pandemic for learning loss. I could blame absentee parents who would rather party and get drunk rather than actually raise their kids. I can blame the school system. First, let's cover how there is a crisis of literacy among adults, apparently, and let's cover how kids learn to read. See, when I was growing up, phonics was the dominant learning method for teaching children how to read. We would associate a letter with a sound or a group of letters with a specific sound and sound patterns in general. Sure, this won't work 100% because English is an absurd Frankenstein of languages, but it helps. And, well, me coming from a science background, I like to say all models are wrong, some are useful, and I find phonics very useful. If I gave you a list of these words, you would know how to pronounce them. Drop the E sound at the end, and don't say the ah sound, but say an A sound as in pay. So, bake, take, make, cake, lake. Once again, does not work 100% of the time. Sake is clearly a Japanese loanword, though for Pete's sake, this is actually going to work in that case. Phonics is apparently not how kids have been working on their reading skills nowadays for some reason. At one of the places I've worked, I was forced, because of subplans, to call upon kids for reading. One kid would try to see an unfamiliar word and try to use the rules that they had learned way back when they were younger and sort of slur out the letters and eventually saying the actual full word. The pronunciation wasn't 100% perfect, especially for foreign words, but you can see the effort there. Meanwhile, kids, some of them would just stop. This was an 8th grade class. A 6th grade teacher at another school said that a lot of the curriculum for reading is dominated by sight words. From how this one teacher put it, it sounds like the teacher would just point to the word alone and say alone, and then ask the class to repeat that word 5 or 6 times, and the students would pick it up this way. In contrast, the phonics method I learned as a child would teach us to read this way. We would focus on the sound specifically, let's say the B sound in book, and repeat it. And then we would need to apply that to something else. If we were focusing on the B sound, we would say, let's point to this board. Or, since this is a kindergarten class, we had black paint, so someone would point to the word black on this paint bottle. Kids have vocabulary, you might as well make them draw connections now. Yes, we did have vocab words because this is a school, what did you expect? The see and say method, well, feels like how people try to play the learn 5,000 characters when learning Sinitic languages. Except this is not always the case in Sinitic languages either. Under normal circumstances, this character for great or big would be pronounced da. However, if you stick this character next to it, it becomes daifu, which means doctor. Tangent aside, there is another issue with this. This obsession with sight words and context clues sounds good for one thing: standardized testing. I hated you as a student. I still hate you as a teacher. Being taught ineptly is one issue, but another issue is how we as a school system manage failure. Good performance means positive cash flow into the school, so there's plenty of incentives to go path of least resistance and just cook the books, try to make the scores look as good as possible. Except standardized test scores aren't a good metric anymore, so there are other metrics we use. So we use the graduation rates, or in the case of lower schools, promotion rates. By having admin incentivize teachers into giving passing scores to children who clearly cannot do the work, well, just push them on. You can't do basic subtraction in 8th grade? Not my problem. You were already held back once. We don't want to deal with you again. That is the high school's problem. Let's kick it to them and have the problem be over there. If you think the parents are going to say something about this horrible idea and how it is setting up their children for failure, I have something to sell you. They don't apparently realize their students can't read. Their children, I shall say, which baffles me because how do they read street signs if they drive? Or menus at restaurants? There is not I won't say they're the majority of parents, but there's a significant minority of parents who treat school like it is a state-sponsored babysitting service. I have dealt with a fair share of parents who are more than happy to scream at me for giving kids failing grades. I gave them a list of bacterial diseases for them to memorize, told them what to memorize, highlighted to them what to memorize, told them the best practices for studying, and still, I get a bimodal distribution in favor of the Fs, despite telling them, hey, you need to memorize the scientific name of a bacteria, you need to spell it correctly, you need to know what disease it causes, and, if applicable, the animal vector. Administration makes some very boneheaded curriculum decisions. They buy into scams, they buy into get successful test scores quick schemes, and it hurts the students. Parents enable this crap by saying, we can't levy consequences that inconveniences our vacation dates. Well, sorry, if you decide to go have a cruise in the middle of summer and your precious angel from above decided to fail biology by having an absentee rap sheet of 90 days. Ugh. Sorry to inconvenience you, not this is the consequences of your little angel's actions. And the pandemic simply made all this more visible. This existed before the pandemic. It will exist long after. This is a story of greed, malice, and morons. There's a standard that needs to be passed, so the school or school system immediately forces their way through as much of a new curriculum as possible because they are enamored by the gimmicks of the curriculum or love the result in the short term. Long-term misery ensues, and it basically cripples that child. And, of course, there's other factors in the background. Administration screws up in other places, such as cooking the books for students who have no business being promoted to the next grade level, because they can't perform at grade level. Parents are more than content to believe their own wild conspiracies about the teachers because the teachers inconvenienced them by failing their kid who has been out for 90 days because the administration's going to be gutless and toothless because suspension is bad. Holding students accountable is bad and reflects on the school. Just another way admin cooks the books. And it's a combination of all these elements plus other elements I have not talked about yet that make all the lives of every single teacher in America a living nightmare. Those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.